Going on a mission for sunlight, floating through acid, and a brand new look for a classic monster, Alien Romulus presents a new chapter in the famed Alien film series. But what exactly happened at the end of it? Alien Romulus begins as a Weyland-Yutani Corporation probe finally reaches the wreckage of the commercial towing vehicle Nostromo. It's been floating in space ever since Warrant Officer Ellen Ripley set the ship to self-destruct in an attempt to destroy the xenomorph that had gotten on board. Unfortunately, the xenomorph was allowed to grow to maturation in the Nostromo thanks to the company's special order directive given to the ship's secret synthetic, Ash. At the end of the first film, it gets on board Ripley's escape shuttle. Ripley ultimately blasts the xenomorph out into space with a harpoon in its chest. The company's probe finds its cargo, a fossilized asteroid, which it secures and then brings back to a space station, where a dozen scientists and soldiers eagerly await its unveiling. As various machines cut open the rock and pull out what was inside it, we see the indentation of the xenomorph, which had laid inside the rock ever since Ripley flung it into space. Turns out that alien wasn't quite gone after all. Almost a year later, Carradine, a colonist and miner for Weyland-Yutani, is sick of living in the Jackson star colony where the dark planet is being endlessly terraformed and the sun literally never shines. She dreams of basking in the sunlight of a completely terraformed planet called Ivaga. She and her adopted brother, an artificial person named Andy, have recently earned enough work hours to be given a travel pass from the company to Ivaga. Unfortunately, Rain is coldly informed that work quotas have been recently raised and that it'll be another 6 years of mining work before she can leave the planet. After that, Rain is pretty amenable to a proposition for escape that some of her fellow miners make to her. Her ex-boyfriend Tyler, his sister Kay, his cousin Bjorn, and Bjorn's partner Navarro have stumbled upon the signature of a decommissioned and abandoned company ship drifting over the planet. Their plan is to use one of the ships they have access to, the Corbellin, and dock with the decommissioned craft to procure the cryo-sleep pods on board, making it possible to travel 9 light-years to Ivaga.
Should be in and out in 30 minutes.
Upon docking with the station, the crew of the Corbellin discovers that the station is broken up into 2 halves, the Remus, which they're currently on, and the Romulus. Both halves had been dedicated to some form of research project. Before they can dwell on what that might have been, they discover that the cryopods are in good shape, but are lacking enough fuel to make the journey to Ivaga. As the pods are transferred to the Corbellin, Tyler, Bjorn, and Andy attempt to locate cryo storage on the Remus. On the Corbellin, Rain discovers that Kay is pregnant as she monitors the progress of the guys on the Remus. She's then heartbroken when Bjorn informs Andy that Ivaga is a non-company world, meaning synthetics aren't allowed there. Rain regretfully admits that she couldn't find a way to tell Andy earlier, but didn't have the heart.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Upon discovering the cryo storage room, Tyler and Bjorn dislodge some tanks, which suddenly sets off a failsafe system, locking the exit to the room and raising its temperature. Rain and Navarro rush to their aid once it's discovered that Andy does not have security clearance to leave the room, but a dormant and half-melted synthetic in a nearby lab might. Rain ejects a programming module from the busted synthetic and brings it to Tyler to put into Andy, who then freezes as his system reboots. Meanwhile, the experiments once frozen in storage have woken up, Facehuggers. Tyler, Bjorn, and an upgraded Andy fight them off and escape the room, but not before one slips past them and attaches itself to Navarro. While Andy's upgrade did not come with any data on the xenomorph, he suggests that the dormant synthetic may have answers. That dormant synthetic turns out to be Rook, another model of the same type as Ash, the synthetic who betrayed the crew of the Nostromo. He was the science officer of the Romulus and Remus, who helped supervise the company's dissection, study, and eventual breeding of the xenomorph that Ripley thought she'd killed. While that Xeno is now dead, there seems to be at least a dozen or more facehuggers on board. Although Rook advises the group to kill Navarro, Rain comes up with the idea to freeze the facehugger's tail in order to pull it off. The freezing works and Navarro is freed, but Rook, who is slowly updating Andy with more of his personality and directives, informs Andy that he must help the humans against their better natures. Andy insists that Navarro not be let back on board the Corbellin, but Bjorn and Navarro elude him long enough to do just that, leaving Rain, Tyler, and Andy trapped on the Remus. Unsurprisingly, Navarro horribly gives birth to a chest-bursting Xeno. In her death throes, Navarro's leg kicks the Corbellin's controls, sending the ship careening around the station. The incident forces the space station even faster toward its doom amongst the rings of the nearby planet. Rain, Tyler, and Andy realize they have to pass through a connecting hall that is now filled with facehuggers to get to the other side of the station. Raising the temperature of the hall to 98.6 degrees so that the huggers can't sense them, they tiptoe through the area, trying not to make noise or overheat from fear. Meanwhile, Kay Kay and Bjorn discover a cocoon that the xenomorph has made for itself after shedding its chestburster skin. Bjorn attempts to kill the xeno while in its cocoon with a cattle prod, unknowingly causing it to bleed acid all over him, melting him to death. The xeno emerges fully grown from its cocoon, and a frantic Kay contacts Tyler through their communication device, causing him and Rain to book it past the leaping facehuggers the rest of the way. The trio finally catches up with Kay, who's eluded the xeno long enough to make it to a door where her brother and friends are. Yet Andy, realizing the xeno is trying to bait them into opening the door for Kay, refuses, leaving her to a presumably grisly fate. Tyler and Rain are distraught, the latter especially so as she learns Andy's new directive is to do what's best for the company. The trio makes their way to the Romulus' main laboratory, within which is the major experiment that Rook wishes Andy to take with them for preservation. It seems that Rook was able to highlight and extract from the xenomorph the primordial black goo that makes up most of its genetic structure. The goo can be used as either life in its rawest form or a deadly pathogen. Rook promises that he synthesized a strain of it that should help make humanity the perfect organism. Taking several vials of the goo for preservation, Andy also arms Tyler and Rain with some pulse rifles found on board, in the hopes that merely aiming the guns at the aliens will keep them at bay. Realizing that the xeno that grabbed Kay is now guarding the main path back to the Corbellin, the trio take an alternate route, which unfortunately leads them straight into a xenomorph hive built in one section of the Romulus. Hearing Kay call for help, the group finds and rescues her, discovering that she hasn't been face-hugged yet due to a massive loss of blood. Before Tyler can take Andy's advice of helping Kay out by injecting her with a vial of black goo, Rain stops him, believing they can make it back to the Corbellin to put Kay in a cryopod and fix her back at the colony.
Run.
During their attempt to make it out of the hive, Tyler is impaled by an alien. Andy is knocked down hard enough to make his system short, but Rain and Kay make it to an elevator just before a slew of drones and facehuggers show up. Not wanting to leave Andy behind, Rain sends Kay up the rest of the way in the elevator.
Rain, are you sure about this?
Only one way to find out.
Kay makes it back to the Corbellin, where the coldly logical Rook insists that Rain and Andy are a loss, and that Kay should enable the remote autopilot so he can send the ship back to the colony with the goo. Kay refuses, but, in pain and worried about her baby, she injects herself with a vial of goo. Meanwhile, Rain successfully rescues Andy, removing the corrupting Rook module from his system and returning him back to normal. At first, it seems the two are doomed and trapped inside the hive, with Rook refusing to assist because it could compromise the survival of the experiment. Rain then realizes that she could turn the artificial gravity off and shoot the aliens without fear of their acid blood making a hole in the station. She does just that, taking out the Xenos before she and Andy precariously float their way through hovering swaths of acid. Halfway through floating up an elevator shaft, however, the gravity comes back on, sending Rain falling to her death before she's caught by a Xeno. Thankfully, Andy is able to overcome his meek nature and rescues Rain, blowing the alien away even as all the Xeno blood causes a huge hole to be torn in the station. Rain and Andy make it back to the Corbellin, taking off from the station just as it starts to hit the planet's rings. Rain intends to venture onto Ivaga with the cryo fuel, and a helpless Rook realizes his mission is a failure before he's destroyed by the exploding station. After putting Kay inside a cryopod and plugging Andy into the ship's systems, Rain is about to climb into a pod herself when alerts start going off for Kay's pod. Upon opening it, Rain discovers a now heavily pregnant Kay who gives violent, bloody birth to some type of egg hybrid. While attempting to remove it from the ship, the egg becomes acidic as it begins to hatch, revealing a humanoid creature inside before it sinks into the Corbellin's cargo hold. Rain grabs some cryotubes and chases the creature into the hold, but it's now hatched and grown rapidly into some hybrid known as the Offspring. The Offspring attempts to suckle from its mother, Kay, who is now lactating black goo of her own. Slashing Andy's neck when confronted, the Offspring feels rejected by Kay and consumes her instead before Rain can stop it. After a tussle in which cryo smoke fills the ship and nearly freezes Rain to death, she's able to put on a spacesuit to finish unhooking the cargo hold and eject the Offspring into space. Eventually, she's successful, sending the unholy creature in the cargo onto the rocks below. Rain puts Andy into a cryopod, tearfully promising that she'll find a way to fix him once they reach Ivaga. Similar to Ripley's lonely final sign-off after the events of Alien, Rain records her own voice log for her cryopod, explaining that she'll try to reach Ivaga even though there's a chance they may not make it. The film ends the way it began, with a spacecraft venturing into the blackness of the infinite. Throughout Alien Romulus, there is a dual theme of sacrifice and parasitism. As the title and the space station suggest, sacrifice can be a force for positive change, and in some cases even a noble thing. Rome being founded through Romulus killing Remus is clearly how Rook and the company view the goo being used to force humanity through a necessary evolution. Yet, as exemplified in the film's subtext, this is not a true noble sacrifice like the ones made by Andy and Rain. Romulus is a movie about the distinction between one's own beliefs and those forced upon them, with the latter being as insidious and destructive as the xenomorph itself.